23 hours alone in a concrete box. What America's most feared prison does to the human mind. No sunlight, no human contact, no phone calls, no programs, no windows. Just you, for concrete walls, and 80 square feet of silence for 23 and a half hours every single day. Not for a week, not for a month. Some men lived like this for over 30 years, and the United States government called it legal. Pelican Bay State Prison sits in Crescent City, California, one of the most remote locations in the continental United States, deliberately chosen so that nobody would have to think too hard about what happened inside it. It opened in 1989 and was immediately described by federal courts as a prison of the future, a state-of-the-art supermax facility built to hold the most dangerous inmates in the California prison system. Inside Pelican Bay is a unit called the Security Housing Unit, the SHU. Prisoners sent to the SHU were locked in a concrete cell measuring 80 square feet with a solid steel door and no window to the outside world. They were released for exactly 90 minutes per day, alone, into a windowless concrete exercise pen that prisoners and guard alike called the dog run. No other human contact, no educational programs, no vocational training, no group activities of any kind. Phone calls were only permitted to receive news of a family member's death. More than 500 men had been in the SHU for over 10 years. 78 had been there for over 20 years. 6 had been there for over 30. In 1993, psychiatrist Dr. Stuart Grassian conducted extensive interviews with men held in the Pelican Bay SHU and documented what he found in a landmark clinical study. He identified a specific psychiatric condition he named SHU syndrome, a disorder caused entirely by prolonged solitary confinement characterized by hypersensitivity to external stimuli, hallucinations, panic attacks, severe paranoia, obsessive thinking, and cognitive deterioration. Men who had entered the SHU psychologically healthy were leaving it psychologically destroyed. In 2013, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Raymond Patterson reported that prisoners held in California security housing units had a 33 times greater chance of dying by suicide than someone in the general prison population. 33 times. In testimony before the California Assembly's Public Safety Committee in 2011, Dr. Craig Haney, the same psychologist who had worked on the Stanford prison experiment, described what he observed in Pelican Bay directly. He said prisoners in these units suffered from chronic and overwhelming feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and depression. He said many had become deeply and unshakably paranoid and were profoundly afraid of other people on the rare occasions they encountered them. He said some had begun to lose their grasp on sanity entirely. One prisoner named Gabriel Reyes, a plaintiff in the landmark lawsuit that eventually challenged the SHU, described the experience this way: unless you have lived it, you cannot imagine what it feels like to be by yourself between 4 cold walls with little concept of time, no one to confide in, and only a pillow for comfort for years on end. In 2011 and again in 2013, prisoners inside the Pelican Bay SHU organized hunger strikes that drew national attention. Thousands of prisoners across California joined in solidarity. In 2012, the Center for Constitutional Rights filed a federal class action lawsuit, Ashker versus Governor of California, arguing that indefinite solitary confinement in the SHU constituted cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution and violated prisoners' right to due process. The United Nations Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, known as the Nelson Mandela Rules, expressly prohibit indefinite solitary confinement and classify any solitary confinement lasting longer than 15 days as cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. The United States had signed agreements affirming those standards. In August 2015, the state of California settled the lawsuit. It agreed to end indefinite solitary confinement entirely. Prisoners could no longer be sent to the SHU based solely on suspected gang affiliation. The long-term isolation policy that had held men in concrete boxes for decades was legally dismantled. More than 500 men spent over a decade in that concrete box. 78 spent over 20 years. 6 spent over 30. And for most of that time, the world outside had no idea it was happening. That is the documented reality of Pelican Bay's security housing unit, one of the darkest corners of the American prison system. If this hit you like this video, share it and subscribe. New cases every single week. And the truth is always darker than what you were told.